Hi, this is Ray Vagg in the studio, and I'm here with Patrick Mitchell, and we're in a different kind of studio today. We're not in my studio. We're here at Goose Creek Studio in Bedford, Virginia. And right now, the work behind me is mine. This show has been up for a little over a month or so. And I'm here interviewing Patrick from the gallery perspective, from the curator's perspective. So I wanted to ask Patrick a few questions about how he got started in the gallery business and why Bedford. So, Patrick?
Well, my partner Mitchell and I both have seminary degrees. We were in education for years up in Washington, D.C., wanting to change the pace of life and do things that were more intentionally spiritual and artistic. So we moved down here, bought a frame shop from a couple who had had it for 27 years, and came in right on the cusp of the local arts community becoming alive and vibrant, and just kind of rode that wave for the last 14 years.
Wow.
Wonderful.
So, what were some of the challenges you faced coming here? Bedford in Virginia is a little more of a conservative town, and
We wondered when we moved here, and we wondered, especially coming from Washington, D.C., if we would find the level of intensity and thoughtfulness in the art community. We'd find it here, and we have found it.
mm-hmm.
It's quirky. It's eccentric at times. Also very spiritual at times. The gallery that we were sitting in, we change out the exhibits at least every other month, featuring either a group show or an individual artist, and specifically artists that are kind of working at the intersection of faith and spirituality, mm-hmm. and the creative imagination. So we've had no difficulty at all finding folks that are interested in exhibiting their work, being part of the larger conversation with the community. So we've enjoyed it. There's certainly at times a conservative cloud over the community, but there's this really vibrant, progressive undercurrent with both creativity and spirituality. And even the conservative cloud, for the most part, is friendly and mm-hmm. and often lovely people.
Nice. So my next question was going to be, which I think you kind of answered mm-hmm. a little bit, what's the vision and the mission of the gallery? And can you maybe expand on that a little bit more?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, because it has shifted. The pandemic changed everything. Before the pandemic, downtown Bedford had a monthly art walk we called Second Fridays, with 6 to 8 participating businesses or restaurants. The pandemic shut all that down, and it's yet to be reinvigorated. But it also made us rethink what we were doing, mm-hmm. and wanting to get back to a more intentionality with the spirituality part of both art and the art making process, mm-hmm. and less of an emphasis on marketplace. Mm-hmm. We're lucky we run a frame shop, and that pays the bills.
It's important.
It is important. And we choose to live simply, but we wanted to see if we could shift the focus from just art being connected to either monetary gain or some kind of creative ego. That we know that art can operate at a deeper level.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to experiment with how we do that here at the gallery. I mean, we are a business,
Right.
so we're not a nonprofit. So we have to figure how those two ideas blend together.
So how do you convey that vision and mission to your artists, and how do you support them in their work expressing that vision and interest? Is there a particular artist you look for, or how do you gather the artists that you bring in here and conform to your mission and vision?
It's a great question. We're really lucky by being a business. We're here 5 days a week. We've been here 5 days a week for the last 14 years. So for the most part, people find us. We occasionally find people when we go to local festivals or art events in either Roanoke or Lynchburg. But for the most part, they find us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the blessing of being here so long. And it's interesting, artists often come into the shop curious about the shop and look around anonymously.
Mm-hmm.
They're scoping us out too. Is this a place that I would like my work to reside? So some artists come in and leave and we never hear from them. Other artists are intrigued with what they see here and the other artists in the space, and then start asking questions. And that's usually how that relationship begins.
Well, I guess I need to speak a little bit how I came to Goose Creek Gallery. It was actually an article, I don't know how many years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago, in the local newspaper. And the similarities between us, Sam and I, and you and Mitchell, were really kind of striking. Sam and I both being retired ministers and seminarians, and the artwork and moving here. And I think I read that you were initially, part of what coming back here was to help elderly relatives, which is very similar to what our experience was coming down here and living here. And so I just knew when I started working again that I was, going to make contact, and hopefully that something was going to be developing, and of course it has. Let me ask you about your work, because I admire your work so much. And if we could pan around the gallery, we'd see aspects of your work in the architecture of the gallery. So tell me a little bit about your work.
Well, for the most part, my studio practice has become creating assemblages from generally leftover parts, whether it's wood or metal machinery parts, that I find in junk or antique stores or just show up in our parking lot one day. So I piece pieces together, and they are generally narrative, almost totem pole constructions, large, often heavy, and that becomes where my energy wants to be. They don't really have often after they're often created for an exhibit, and after the exhibit they're so big and clunky they often don't have a home. so they get either they get just stored somewhere, or they get deconstructed and used in a future piece. I don't do things to sell. I don't do commissions. I have done work for other people, but it's they give me an idea of what they want, and then I create on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And if they want it at the end, it's theirs. If they don't want it, that's fine too.
Right.
It'll find it.
Well, I guess I was lucky because I was able to purchase a piece of yours, a smaller wall hanging that it hasn't found a place in this home, but it'll definitely be in our next home.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about the chapel.
Mm-hmm. So Mitchell and I have been looking for years for the opportunity to expand what we're doing in the gallery to a building set aside just for the exploration of art and spirituality. And we looked at a couple of local buildings that didn't work out, and person from the local historical society had said that there was a church out in the country that they were looking to do something with, an historic church. And we went to look at it. Simply a one-room brick building commissioned in 1844. It was an active congregation for 135 years and then sat empty for 50 years. So we made a deal with the Historical Society. They gave us the building if we would restore it and place it under historic easement. And we've done all that. Well, we haven't restored it yet. We're in the process of restoring it. And using it kind of as an experimental place for both art and prayer or meditation. Not meant to be, we're not creating some kind of permanent structure, but we see that as a place where artists and spiritual seekers can workshop ideas in the changing natures of both what it means to create art and what it means to be spiritual. And both of those things are in such flux right now that creative folks need a place to experiment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the place is about.
So what kind of events have you held?
Well, they tend to be centered around a particular theme or traditional religious festival or holiday. They tend to be very interfaith opportunities, incorporating spiritual practices from multiple religious traditions that tend to be what we like to say is radically inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
And again, experimental, using local people who are already doing that kind of innovative generative work already in our community. So we're not looking for outside people to come out in and teach us something. We're just taking the creative folks we already have here and seeing how that all meshes together. It's very much a work in progress.
Yeah, I have not made it out there yet, but Sam and I both look forward to going out there for one of the events.
It's rather primitive. There's no electricity.
Uh-huh.
And there's no running water. So the place has an outhouse.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we created it to be off grid because we simply didn't have the money for the infrastructure we needed to get electricity and running water out there. And the more this is 3 years into this project, the more we're convinced that it's going to stay off grid.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a place where folks meet weekly. It's an event space that's used 6 or 8 times a year. So being off grid has worked.
Well, it sort of goes along with that monastic.
Sure it does. Sure it does. The simplicity.
Simplicity, yeah.
And the church never had running water, so it wasn't a hindrance to the religious community that was there.
Oh. Well, where do you see the gallery going from here? What's the next step?
That is the big question. for many years, the gallery was the one consistent. It never was the only art venue in town, but we were consistently there. Over the past few years, the Bauer Center, our local art centers, really seems to be on solid footing now. The Electric Company has an absolutely amazing art gallery. And there's a couple of smaller venues in town, which frees us up from the responsibility we once felt for the community to be that grounding. Finally go off and do our own thing. Be this kind of, we've always been quirky, but get even quirkier. And to really celebrate that sense of spirituality and radical inclusiveness. And kind of shift. I know artists struggle with this. Artists that are working as artists, as their income or their supplemental income, that we often undervalue, not devalue. We don't emphasize marketplace. We've had artists that say, lovingly, they say, you don't work hard enough to sell stuff. I mean, and we believe that art is so personal that it'll find where it needs to be. So.
Well, I think there's always a venue for art, for certain art, and different areas of the country attract different artists and different venues. So I think trying to bring a broader picture of art is a little bit challenging.
Oh, sure it is.
Yeah.
And the other thing the future of the gallery is that, and museums and art institutions across the world are struggling with this, that we've become almost elitist in who is attracted to these spaces. And it's not really, who walks through the door is not a cross-section of who and what this community is. And how do we begin to shift that? So the folks that come see art here are reflective of the community at large. Or is the question, and this is part of the experimentation with the chapel, is maybe the gallery is not the place to do that. Maybe art needs to go out into the world somehow. And we hadn't figured that out yet. But all major art institutions are asking that same question. Because who comes through the doors is not reflective of the larger community. And how do we make that shift so we're relevant?
Well, I think that's part of what I'm doing with my YouTube channel. Raymond Vagg in the studio is I share what I'm doing, but I also want to share art with a larger audience, people that may not necessarily think that they have the ability to pick art or to buy art, and I've constantly said when I'm talking on my channel that there's a tremendous amount of art out there that is wonderful, great artists, and it's not the astronomical prices that sometimes people picture art done by hand by an artist. And my hope is that message gets out there, that you have the ability to have art in your home. So
But even that concept of art in your home, I think we have to take a lesson from what's happened with music and the younger generation, that it's not so much about ownership or possession, but access. So what does art in your home in the future look like?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we get ahead of that or be a part of that conversation
Mm-hmm.
instead of running to play catch up
Right.
with a world that's changing quickly around us?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's,
Well, does that talk a little bit of, I don't know what they call them, NF, the artwork that you buy online that you don't own, that you.
I mean, it's that whether that craze lasts or not, it's certainly asking interesting questions
Mm-hmm.
about art and about ownership
Mm-hmm.
and about the tangible reality of what art is.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, I think that what we create in our studio practice is more a reflection of our generation than it is of what's coming, you know.
Mm.
And it's as
As far as process goes, or as far as content goes,
as
like is the two-dimensional piece of art hanging on the wall dying, and there's going to be something
I wonder.
newborn?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Or that two-dimensional object is is transient. In other words, it's in the space for a while, and then it's not in the space. Um, I'm not sure where that's going. I am firmly established in the old mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I just know from watching that something different's coming. You know, um, when we can reach so many more people through social media, um, we have to figure out what that means, and not just for marketplace, but for how artists work and how artists envision stuff. I mean, if you've got, and that's what some of the stuff we'll talk about later, is when you've got powerful works that over the course of 2 months, just people walking in off the street, you know, you're talking 100, 200 people have seen, when there are ways for so many more people to see it, you know, and how is it presented to make it interesting?
Mm-hmm.
There's one thing to sit and watch, and for you and I want to see the piece in person. I want to see how it's painted, you know, how it's stretched or whatever. And is there a broader community out there that's looking differently?
Well, I think that there's so many questions in that, and so many unanswered developments. I think that artists today have the ability to. I think there's a big question where, from the artist standpoint, is, do I need a gallery to sell my work? I can sell my work online, and I can reach an audience, a worldwide audience. That's one of the questions, and then the other aspect of that is that seeing something in person, as watching it on television, or viewing it on television, I think there's something lost.
Mm-hmm.
You know, totally. And I think that's a question of the internet and our this form of communication that we've now gotten ourselves into, where a lot gets lost, whether it's the word or whether it's the visual, it's lost. You know, you can't convey an emotion in an emoji, really, you know, what you're really thinking. And even in words, I think that, you know, so many times when you're trying to express something and it doesn't come across. So I think it's the same sort of issue or challenge with visual work, that that visual work is lost if you're not in the presence of it. I mean, you know, look at the Mona Lisa. You can see it 1,000 times, but when you go see it at the Louvre, you're just completely awestruck as many times as you've seen it on, you know, on in print or on television. So I think that that's a challenge, a real challenge with this digital world that we're, you know, involved with. And again, I think that goes back to what I'm trying to say, is that to experience art in your home and appreciate it and have it there is something that a lot of people don't get. They don't experience. They haven't. They think it's beyond them. And I think that I'd like to see the appreciation for something that's done by hand increase, so to speak.
Again, I am right there in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's that resonates with me.
Yeah.
But as a gallery owner, an observer of how people engage or look at art, it's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have to do something on our end to step up our game that we haven't quite figured out yet. You know, and that's the question that I don't have the answer for yet.
Right.
But we're interested in figuring it out. And again, not for marketplace so much as the work we have in this space is powerful. It's often healing or inspirational or thought provoking. And so for us, what's missed out is not the sale, but what's missing is that opportunity for that art to impact an individual or a community in a broader way. And the gallery doesn't seem like it's enough anymore.
Interesting. Well, I think, you know, as an artist, I struggle with the idea of creating a two-dimensional piece or a three-dimensional piece, and have that convey an emotion or a particular emotion. So I think that's a challenge, you know, for artists. And the viewer has to make up their own mind about what they're looking at. So that's I think that's a different discussion, maybe.
Yeah, it's
a whole. We can go on and on for that.
Part two.
Part two. So, do you have any other?
No, I mean, we are just so grateful to have both you and Sam in our lives, and have been grateful for your willingness to kind of experiment. You know, it's nice to be around artists that are willing to put themselves out there. And
well, I'm grateful also because I think you pushed me in directions that, you know, I might not have found for myself, but certainly grateful that I'm here, and I'm certainly grateful that you've allowed me to display my art here.
It's our pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody that's stuck around for this. This will be certainly on my channel, Raymond Vagg, in the studio. And hopefully we'll be doing more conversations like this. Thank you again,
My
Patrick.
pleasure.
All righty. Take care.